Welcome. It's good to be back. This is session 5, Restoring the Soul. I love it in the 23rd Psalm when it talks about God restoring my soul. And the work we're doing here, kind of taking things apart, looking at our emotions, what happened, the impact of that, how did it affect my life? Well, how do I see myself? All of these understandings of the soul is part of the approaching Jesus that he might restore our souls. Looking at God's promises. God promised in Joel to restore to you the years the locust has eaten. God sees our grief. He sees our loss. He will transform mourning, grief, into celebration and dancing. In Psalm 30, he will remove our mourning clothes and clothe us in happiness, in joy. So in the past weeks, we've been thinking and listening, writing and reflecting about what happened to us and what happened in us, trying to understand. Lots of Emmanuel moments happening around this circle of people saying, Jesus, what do you want me to know? How do I leave the lie behind and then start to walk in agreement with the truth? How do I reframe my understanding of who I am and how you see me? How do I learn to live as a whole person? So, God shows us the promise of return and restoration, transforming mourning into happiness, to show us what that looks like in our lives, that what the enemy intended for evil, God intended for good. God will transform. What was stolen from us will be returned. He promised. There are a number of things that get in the way of that. And one of them, I want to scroll here to my notes because I want to say it clearly. One is our own expectation. And some of that expectation can be influenced by what we've been taught. Do we expect that God will actually show up? Do we expect that he will do what he said he would do and that he is who he said he is? He said, I will restore to you the years the locust has eaten, what was stolen from you. I will make all things new. It is the work of God from beginning to end. Maybe because we've been taught that we shouldn't. We don't expect that our losses would be restored. We don't expect that our grief would ever be transformed. Sometimes because we haven't felt free to even feel our feelings, we don't have any expectation that feelings of sadness and loss might ever evolve and grow into feelings of peace and joy. Maybe we have not believed that God would actually do good for us or in us. You've written a little about what you thought about that. Was it true? God's desire and will and heart is to restore what is broken in us, to replace lies with truth, to redeem what was stolen and return us to his original design for wholeness and healing. God does not want us to live with broken souls. It's simply not his will. He doesn't want us to have divided thoughts or scattered emotions or be unclear and confused in our decisions. He doesn't want us to lose who we are. He wants us to walk in identity. I have called you by name. You are mine. You are precious and honored in my sight, and I love you. He's named us. He wants us to be who we really are. not some religious construct or some rule-bound person attempting to do what someone else said we should. Not a person who's living in pain, whose identity and functioning is to avoid pain, to somehow survive, but not thrive. God's heart is that we would thrive and be who we really are. He says, I will make all things new. I will give you beauty in the place of ashes, the oil of joy instead of depression. Some of us have been taught that God allows, that He wills terrible things to happen. Why? So that He might be glorified, so that He might draw us closer to Himself. That may sound fine in theory, but in reality, the deep tragedies of our lives, the things that have happened to people in this room, things that have happened to people you love and care about, abandonment, divorce, mental illness, addiction, the loss of a baby, the death of someone with a whole future ahead of them, the car accident, the fire, the betrayal, the abuse. None of those things are the heart of God, who says, I am making all things new. You are precious and honored in my sight, and I love you. And He will do good for us. The radical idea that God really is good, and that what He does is good. Who He is good. What He says is good. The way He is in our lives is good. And if it isn't good, it isn't God. The plans of the enemy are for killing, stealing, and destroying, for destruction in our lives, to break us. And God says, I will come and make all things new. I will make whole what is broken. I will mend the brokenhearted. He never desired that the heart would be broken in the first place. But He will come and He will do what He promised. To believe that and walk in it is sometimes scary, because it sometimes doesn't look the way we thought. It doesn't happen at the pace we thought it should happen. We discover that healing happens in pieces, or that there are more pieces of us than we expected. And that integration and becoming whole is going to take a long time. And I want to say, God said, I am with you always. I will never leave you or forsake you. I'll be with you in all the times. I'll be with you over all the time. So to walk in this as we look at what happened, as we really now this next week pick apart what happened, to stand in that certainty that God is good, that everything He does is good, that His heart for me is good, and that He will bring good. And what the enemy intended for evil, God intends for good. So, to your breakout groups, talk about the writing, the looking in the mirror time, the thoughts, confidentiality, no crosstalk. Really be present for each other. After that, you'll gather as a large group for 10 minutes and have a chance to share a little from the breakout groups. Then I will see you again to talk about next week and some hard work and Emmanuel.